Now 6:30. I'd like to call this Planning and Zoning Commission special called meeting to order. Can I have a roll call, please?
Scheibmeier.
Here.
Snydow.
Here.
McCall.
Here.
Christie.
Here.
Garrett.
Here.
James.
Here.
Chase. Sorry.
Here.
Item number 2, citizens' comments. Any members of the public? I will open citizens' comments if there's anyone here hiding who wants to speak. This is your minute. Is there anybody online, Deb? No, it's 3.
No,
No?
ma'am.
Okay. Then I will close citizens' comments. Item number 3, consent agenda. Can I have a motion? Anyone?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
make a motion to approve the consent agenda, items A and B.
I have a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, consider impossible action. Postponed on 6/8/21, consideration of exception to Section 41-10 B and C, City of Kyle Subdivision Code, exception to requiring plating for 400, 402, 404 South Burleson. I don't see Mr. Atkinson. There he is.
Yeah, so I'm in the meeting. I don't know if it's on my side. The city feed is flickering back off and on, but I don't know if y'all can see me or not.
I can see you now.
Okay, great. So there has not been a resolution between the property owners. There's still one property owner explicitly not having given consent to move forward with this. So there's a couple options. You can just, one of them is you can refuse to consider it, and the other one is delay it to the next voting meeting.
What is staff recommendation? To postpone?
I think right now, I still haven't had a conversation with all the parties in the same room at the same time. So I would like that. And until that happens, I think I'd like it if you would just postpone it, because we can always have them withdraw or rescind the application later. But if we end it, then it's a different issue. So the next voting meeting will be the end of July. We're switching them for next month because
Right.
I'll be on vacation, and so will the rest of staff. We're just trying to move some blocks around. So the next voting meeting will be July 27th.
The reason I ask is I want to be sure that you want to, like, this is going to come to some resolution. I don't want it to keep postponing.
It will. It will.
Okay.
We would have had a conversation with them earlier if there was, a threat to health, safety, and welfare. This is just a ministerial function of this board. If staff could have done this on our own, we would have handled this ourselves. But
Okay.
unfortunately, staff is not allotted a lot of leeway, so it had to come to you.
Okay.
The only thing we can't do is get the 3 of them together in the same room at the same time to hammer out the same agreement in front of one another. That's what I want to see happen.
Sure.
If it doesn't happen, so be it. They're stable properties. They have been. The expectation is they'll continue to be. And they can withdraw and everybody will go forward and nothing is lost. But I think if you were to deny it tonight, that's a different expectation. So I would rather postpone it. There's no harm in postponing it. We can bring it up at the next voting meeting.
Okay. So I'm going to make a motion that we postpone this 4A as it is written until our next work meeting, which will be the end of July. Can I-
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Adjournment.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
move we adjourn the meeting.
I have a motion to adjourn. Can I have a second?
I
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This meeting is closed. Yeah. It is now 6:35. I would like to call this Planning and Zoning Commission workshop meeting to order. Can I have a roll call, please?
Scheibmeier.
Here?
Snydell.
Here.
McCall. Here. Christie.
Here.
Garrett.
Here.
James.
Here.
Chase.
Here.
Citizens' comments. I will open citizens' comments. Seeing no one in the auditorium here for citizens' comments, I will ask Mrs. Guerra, do we have anyone on the line? No. Okay, then I will close citizens' comments. Item number 4, general discussion. Continued discussion regarding amendments to section 41-146 streetlights. Mr. Atkinson.
Before Will gets started, just a little bit of housekeeping. I don't know if you're watching the feed on this meeting, or it might only be me, but although it is strobing, it is not doing that to the live feed. We appear normal to anybody who may be watching us out on YouTube land, so rest assured.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to say.
I can see Will okay on my screen
Yep,
and not strobing here.
great.
Okay, Will, it's yours.
Right, well, thank you. All right, so this should be the last time we bring this back to y'all. We just want to give y'all a little bit of an update on where we were on this amendment, and then following this, we're going to bring it forward to City Council for their consideration for the amendment to the streetlights. So last time it was a pretty big deal updating it, but y'all didn't really have a whole bunch to say, which is fine. The last thing that we've done essentially is in subsection E3, we've made it a little bit more specific in terms of what the hardware we want to see from administration and from Public Works. They've had their input relating to the types of decorative and non-decorative streetlights they want to see. So that's essentially all we've changed. And then whenever we draft the actual ordinance and put it all together, we're going to have this this document here, all the wording and what have you. And then we're also going to have these thrown in there as well, the drawings of them. So this is the standard streetlight pole, the HAPCO one. All new ones going forward will be black powder coat for the pole itself. We don't really say anything about the lamp head itself because that's a PEC lamp. But they do understand that it's going to be dark sky compliant. Let's see, and just to give y'all probably already looked at it, but just so everybody else can see it. They're in the public sector. This is the lamp that we're looking at, the headlamp for the decorative pole outlined in the green box. And when someone's going through, if we're these are going to be standard sheets we're going to have for if a developer needs to order these and what have you, they know which ones to select. So it's going to be black as well. Here is the decorative pole. And let me know if you can't see these when they pop up. The decorative pole is actually the AP 2602, the one on the far left. And then the decorative cross arm in case they want to do double-headed lamps or even triple or quadruple even. So so that way we have a complete specific piece of hardware or multiple pieces of hardware that go together well. And these are the closest modern day equivalents of the lamps that were constructed in with the Burleson Street project and the Philomena Street projects. Any questions?
Anyone have any questions?
Just one question here.
Paul does.
And apologies if this is coming in late. We have on the front of this, item 4, intersection with high accident rates. Do we have that quantified what that is? Are we wanting to keep that vague on purpose? Or?
Yeah, we didn't. I'm trying to remember exactly. Let's see. So we have the way that sometimes accidents works, the way they quantify it is based on a certain percentage, based on types of street functional classifications for accidents. But also we wanted to throw in there the vague intersections with high accident rates, because we didn't want to be held to specifically a certain metric. If we needed to go under that, if we felt like there was an intersection that it seemingly has abnormally high accident rates and the data didn't reflect that, we wanted to be able to have a legitimate workaround that was built into the code.
This would probably never impact the developer though, right? Because if they're building something, it can't have a high accident rate because it's not there yet, right? So this is really just for the city's use to appeal to this clause as to why
Yes.
we'd need to add something.
Yeah, so if we, in that specific case, that would seem accurate, where if we're doing a CIP or a capital improvement project, and we're upgrading our street lights and what have you, and we have to look at intersections, and that way we can point to it in our code and say, okay, yeah, we're going to do this or what have you. So
Okay, so it's probably then best to leave it vague. Okay.
yes, it was something that one of our engineers wanted to have in there, and she used to work for TxDOT.
Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you for all the work on this. It looks good.
It's my pleasure. I'll give you all's regards to the other staff who also worked on it as well.
Okay, item 4C, discussion of proposed subdivision, zoning, and landscape code amendments. Mr. Atkinson.
All right, so first I'm going to do what I'm dubbing the easy code edits, or what we hope are the easy code edits that should hopefully pass through the code pretty easily, or any updates, but we'll see if that happens. So we have a running list of items that we would like to see updated, and things that we keep running up against, or things that we think that'll help the community whenever someone does come in. So I'm going to share my screen. And so we don't want to the list is far longer than this, but these are just a handful of things that we can start looking at. And we need y'all's input and approval to move forward with this per our code, since staff can't specifically bring it forward. So if y'all like these, give us direction. And if you want to bring them forward, let's do it. If not, so be it. So the first one is section 41-136 for lots. I'm adding a section, or we want to add a section called utility lots. The reason behind this is the way our zoning code currently is set up is the minimum lot dimensions and metrics to it are based on specifically the zoning. So let's say you have a single family detached zoning for R11, which is 80 feet wide and over 8,000 square feet. Well, that means also there are times where landscaping lots they're trying to put those in, and they have to also be 8,000 square feet and 80 feet wide, or trailhead access, or utility lots. And when they're really better served to not have to meet those minimum requirements. For example, Public Works likes having sometimes they like having water lines that cross between cul-de-sacs so it loops better. And they don't want people anywhere inside the easement that they need. So if we create a lot that is also the same dimensions and shape as the easement, it's owned by the city, and nobody will encroach into it with their fences, because easements are usually they span borders between two property lines, and there's a fence down the middle. That way Public Works doesn't have to come in and remove the fence and then replace it after they do some work. This accounts for those non-standard lots that sometimes pop up through just the way design happens with subdivisions, that they don't need to have that minimum acreage or the minimum dimensions, and they're better served to be exempt from that. Now, these are not lots that are going to have houses on them. They're not going to, for the lots that actually have to follow the zoning code that have like commercial lots, or, you're going to have a warehouse or a house or multifamily, those do have to meet those conditions still, those minimum dimensions and lot widths, but not in these specific cases. And Public Works has been asking, well, can we update the code to include stuff like this? They've been asking for like a year now. And this is the code that we came up with. This is the amendment. And it allows staff to administratively approve those where it's found necessary as we're doing our review. And then whenever our reviews are complete on subdivisions, we'll send them to y'all for approval. So does anybody have any questions on the first one or any thoughts? Or would like any clarification?
I just have a quick question, this is Patty. On these lots, who is responsible for landscaping them and maintaining them? Does that become a city obligation, or is it the developer or the subdivision?
It depends. Yes, ma'am. It depends on if they're landscape lots. Those are typically maintained by the HOA because HOAs are a requirement of subdivisions in Kyle. If it's a utility lot, specifically, like if we're asking the developer to loop a water line through two different parts of the street to just better keep the system cleaner and functioning better, that's a lot that the city will have to maintain. And that's pretty typical because it would be our easement anyway. So we would be in there maintaining it, mowing it, making sure the utilities inside of that were properly maintained. So that would be deeded over to us as well.
Okay, thank you.
Does that explain it a little bit better?
It did, thank you.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions?
On lots specifically? Yeah, no.
You do?
No. We're going one by one, right? Okay.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it earlier. This is a work session, so we're not voting on these or making any decisions. This is the opportunity for staff to seek direction. And so the direction from you would be, yes, please bring that back and we'll make that happen. It could be, let's make some changes to this before it goes forward, or this isn't an issue right now, don't climb this tree anymore. So, or anything in between or beyond those suggestions, so.
All right. If there's no objections, I'll go on to the next one. Section 41-142, water and wastewater, septic tanks. Right now, the way our code specifically reads, it's based on a linear distance from the property line to the lot to be sewered. So if there is adequate wastewater service sewer lines in the city of Kyle, within 500 feet of a property line of someone wanting to build, they have to tie in to the wastewater service. If they don't want to, they have to go get an exception from city council, a waiver to be able to tie in, if it makes sense to not to. Sometimes someone has just an out parcel and they're inside the city limits and they want wastewater, but they realize the cost of installing it 500 feet away is absurdly expensive. And it makes more sense to build a septic tank inside the city limits. Or from a practical standpoint, trying to construct the wastewater line down to that mark, it just doesn't work. From the grades, going downhill, there's not enough room to get there between two houses or what have you. And so this edit in the underlying blue gives staff, or engineering department really, but staff, to have a little bit of flexibility in determining if, from a practical design standpoint, if they have to tie in. That way, only the most, this way, it just makes it a little bit more flexible. There are times where we probably shouldn't have to need to bring this to city council, but there are some times that we do need to, and that it should be to a greater extent left up to the city engineer's office or staff for that matter. Any questions?
I have some,
For sure.
Madam Chair. A couple things. No permit. What kind of permit are we talking about? Something specific for the septic tank itself, or our building permit in general for the improvement?
Both, sort of. So, for example, if you are trying to build a house on your lot, or even a commercial structure, but in this case, let's just say a house, you have to have some way to be able to flush your toilet and provide adequate sewer service, whether it be tying into the city's public wastewater system or being able to have an on-site septic facility, so a septic tank, if you will. One way or the other, you have to do it. If you have to go to the to get a septic tank, that means you have to go to the county development services department because it's the health department. They have to deal with that. But if you're required to tie into the city's wastewater service, then it's just a permit from the city of Kyle. And sometimes you're right next door and you can easily just tie in, but sometimes you have to submit what's called construction plans, which are public improvement plans showing that have to be reviewed by staff and approved, and then you have to start your project.
Does the city specifically permit septic systems, though?
It doesn't. The county does. However, they need some sort of letter from us saying that the person inside the city of Kyle is allowed to have septic,
Okay.
or not. Well, if they're bringing it to the county, they have to have a.
And are there
a
any
letter from
technical
us.
guidelines then also within the city charter that govern, like, lot's got to be X big and septic system has to be so far away from property line, that kind of thing?
Both. In chapter 41, in the subdivision regulations, we talk about minimum lot size, but we don't necessarily put a reason before that in chapter 41 in the subdivision regulations, but the reason is for the tile field. And that's why we allow lots to be smaller, down to 20,000 square feet, or in some cases 9,600 square feet for what's termed advanced septic. But those guidelines are also a requirement in the county. So,
Okay, so there's not some gap in here too? We're going to allow a permit on some lot that's just this wide because they happen to be 500 feet away.
not likely.
They'll get caught on another technical restriction that prevents that from happening.
It should. The county's doing everything they can to try and bring septic tanks into public wastewater. Septic tanks tend to,
Yep.
they don't get maintained. They fail. They're a challenge, especially for groundwater. So they're trying to get everybody onto public wastewater as they can. One of the reasons that they have such tight controls is to make sure that the design metrics are met, and that tile fields can only be on your own property. They're not supposed to go across property lines, and that they're adequately sized for whatever it is that's feeding into them. So they're we're really glad that they look at that, because it's pretty involved.
And sewer service here could be City of Kyle, it could be Monarch Water or whatever, whoever might.
It could be an SUD or an MUD by somebody else. It could be City of Kyle. It could be anybody that puts it together. Any package plant that gets it done.
Okay. Looks good to me.
Any other questions or needs for clarification?
I have one.
There's another question.
Just for the record, when I read it and says this distance is not solely based on straight line distance, I'm guessing that means geography, but I'm just going to ask for the record, what are other things that it may be based on other than straight line distance?
Geography. Yeah, that's essentially it in a nutshell. Topography specifically. Sometimes it may be downhill from the nearest manhole, and that would mean they would have to pump it uphill to get there. And maybe it's better that they have a septic tank, or maybe the closest straight line distance is between two houses, that there's not enough room to actually put a manhole or a sewer line in between, because if the city has to go in there and maintain it, they can't get their digging machines in there because there's just simply not enough room. So from a practical standpoint, whether it be maintenance or topography, sometimes there's severe limitations to where it makes more sense to have septic.
Okay, that looks like that's it, Will, for questions.
Okay. The next one is a series of definitions that are in our zoning code in section 53.5. The first one is amending the definition of building acre, and I'll be honest, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this one, and so I'll probably need Howard's input a little bit. But essentially, what it is right now, the way it's worded, it is not technically net density when you're talking about building acre. So when we say building acre, you're looking at, you take your gross acreage, say you got 100 acres for a subdivision, right? And you have what's called a net density. You have your gross density and net density. Gross density means you can have 5 houses per gross acre. But in reality, after you take out, parkland, floodplain, streets and all that, you maybe get down to 3 houses per acre. And that's our building acre. And that's what that is. So we're trying to make a clarification amendment to it saying this is net density, because the way we've been interpreting it based on the wording it currently is you subtract all those unusable areas from a house building or a commercial building standpoint. And then now that's your new acreage. And then you still have to subtract stuff from that. So it's even less dense than what it even states in the code in reality. So we're trying to make this density like specific for net density. And if there's a way that we can reword this, if it's better to do it that way, that's fine too. But we're trying to make this work and have common sense for all parties involved.
Is this, sorry, is this like a concession to developers for problematic properties where there's lots of floodplain issues and stuff like that? And I'm not saying that's a pejorative kind of thing, but is that what we're attempting to do here? Give them a little more leeway?
It's not so much from a developer standpoint, but it is the people that are affected most by it when they want to develop their property. We're not trying to necessarily throw them a bone or anything, but we just want it to make more sense when we're trying to explain stuff to them in our code.
It's a clarification. It's really just, definitions is just another opportunity to put forward a term that you're using during the course of development. This is unique to Kyle. This isn't done other places like this anyway. So a lot of times when folks come in and say, wait. So I can build 5.5 to the acre when I read the code, but then when I go back and actually draw it and come back, I'm supposed to remove portions of the land and then recalculate again. So I'm not actually getting that acreage. And so we have to define the difference between gross density, net density, and then what we term in Kyle as buildable acre. And so it's fine if that's Kyle's code, and that's how Kyle does it. And Kyle can define its processes and procedures however it chooses to for itself. That is a police power. It's fine. But this is just another definition to try and help staff answer the question for the folks that come to us and try and build here. This doesn't affect a family loading up and going to dinner. This doesn't affect them. This is a very esoteric definition that a small percentage of folks who live, work, and do business in the city of Kyle deal with. However, when they deal with it, it gives everybody headaches. So we're just putting a couple of more definitions out there together to try and get some greater understanding.
You're telling them that they can build X amount of homes on an acre, right? And then when they come in, you say, from that acre, you have to have this, and this floodplain. So they're really not getting that many homes on the acre.
Correct. When you talk about, I use the 5.5 number quite a bit. That is a gross density. What should happen is the actual density of the project will go up when you subtract the areas out of the subdivision that can't be used for building, and that's where your road rights of way and your utility corridors.
Yeah.
And those happen in every subdivision. Then there are some other improvements or encumbrances that are present in land. Floodplains, not always present. Stream courses, not always present. They are sometimes, not always. Those get caught up in this when you're in the city of Kyle. And then the third one are the discretionary encumbrances, like parkland. Parkland's a great thing, but you're not selling parkland
Right.
for floor area of homes.
Right.
So what gets curious is that Kyle puts forward a requirement of dwelling units per buildable acre. And they say, oh, does that mean net acreage? And we have to look at them and go, not exactly. It just depends on what's in it. So the definition of what buildable acre is in Kyle depends upon what the product is that's brought to us. What's in it that we know is going to be there, right? Roads and utility corridors. What might be in there, rivers, streams, wetlands, and what they put in there, parks and public areas and stuff. So we don't really know until we get to the end. So when we have that conversation with them, we like to be able to talk about all the three different categories, the net, gross, and buildable acres, so they can get something that's code compliant.
God bless you.
I wasn't drafted. I signed up for this. So did he.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Sorry. So just to clarify, this is essentially bringing the code into compliance with how the city explains it to folks who use this terminology.
Essentially.
Okay, and so this is how we've held it consistently since like y'all have been here essentially.
Yes.
Okay.
The last time I remember going round and round and round and round with this was Charles Teeple's apartments on Marketplace with Carrie Bressler. And very interesting project. Again, from your windshield, you probably don't know what went on with that. It's a 3-story garden apartment that's next to Kohl's, and that's about everything you know about it. But it's actually part of a much larger development, which was developed all at the same time. And there was a stormwater management pond back there, which was capitalized by us as part of a non-buildable piece of their land. To the rest of the world, they should have been able to use that in their calculation of gross acreage to come up with net acreage when they pulled that out. But we had to look at them and say, well, once you pull that out, you have to calculate again. And then it talked about the number of units they had, which meant how much parking they needed. And we went back and forth and back and forth. And this stuff like this would have helped us at the time. But this is not a change in policy. This is just, for my taste, when we bring back text amendments, if we bring back all of these, even if we only bring back one of these, I always want to expand definitions section. The definitions section should be the longest chapter in any zoning ordinance, period, anywhere. You should define every third word in every ordinance that you have. I mean, just to make sure that there's no lost understanding. So further clarification is great. We should do a lot more of this.
Anyone else? Okay, Will, that's it.
All right. I'm going to skip the multifamily residential one first. I'm going to go down to Townhouse because the multifamily residential ties into the section 53443. So as a larger conversation. All right. So Townhouse, it's a simple edit. The reason why we're changing it from 3 to 4 or want to is because elsewhere in our zoning code where it talks about townhomes, it specifically says it's a minimum of 4 attached side-by-side units. So we're just changing it so there's no more discrepancy. That's it on this. And we just wanted to bring it forward and let y'all know what we want to do.
Okay.
So we don't
Sounds
have to have
good.
fights with people wanting to, yep.
What is it if it's not
Okay.
a 3 or a 2 or a 4? It's a 3?
Triplex.
It's a triplex.
Yeah,
okay.
single family, duplex, triplex. Quadplexes are a thing now for side by side, all on grade in a square with a shared little garden in the middle. But these are typically the ones that share a wall or two, depending on the location.
Okay. So, the multifamily residential restricted currently says it's for 5 maximum apartments per building. And I think it would be nice to change it to 10 maximum. And there's a reason. So the only time you see a reference of multifamily residential restricted is in section 53-443 in the CBD2 Central Business District. All right. And the reason why I think it's a good idea to up it to essentially double the amount of units allowed from 5 to 10 is to help with developers pro forma, in short. So when you're trying to build or design a building or some sort of development, you have to make sure your numbers work. And when you limit the maximum amount of ways that you can make money off of it, the harder it is to develop something, even if the city's encouraging it. So in downtown Kyle, certainly staff, and there are a couple of council members that are in support of having more vertical mixed use in downtown Kyle, which you can do by right already in the CBD2 zoning district. You can have commercial on the bottom floor and you can have residential on floors 2 through 4. You can have up to 4 stories in downtown Kyle by right. But you can only have 5 units per building. And those are a minimum of 500 square feet. So if your vertical mixed use is extremely expensive, and to help defray the cost per unit, I'm proposing that we increase it to 10. That'll help be able to fill up the spaces on those floors from a residential standpoint. You get more people living downtown being able to, go shop at the stores downtown, go to the pie company, go to anything that's downtown and be able to help out those businesses and enjoy a walkable area. So as a component with that, I'm also asking in section 53-443 to help better align the CBD2 zoning district with also the building code. And I did talk with our building official just to make sure that this makes sense to some extent. It would be good, generally, if we have one multifamily dwelling unit on the ground floor in the CBD2 zoning district. And that way it better complies with the Fair Housing Act, which allows for ADA compliance. So you have a ground floor dwelling unit that's ADA compliant, so you can have people who have a harder time getting around or in a wheelchair or what have you, being able to live downtown. It also ties into the idea that if you're under a number of certain units in a building and you have a ground floor unit, there's a less likely chance that you have to build an elevator to the floors above, floors 2 through 4, which is extremely expensive and is potentially cost prohibitive, like significantly, for buildings in downtown Kyle because the lots are so small and the property values aren't as high as we like them to see to some extent to make this stuff more doable. So if we figure out a way to make it code compliant with the building code, to make it less expensive to build something that we want to encourage downtown, we should. And that's how these two tie together. Increase the dwelling unit amount per building and allow a ground floor unit to comply with the Fair Housing Act. That being said, we can say, let's put the dwelling unit that's on the ground floor at the rear of the building. A lot of the, in downtown Kyle, there's alleys everywhere. So if you're building a building, there's going to be rear access. There's going to be parking back there to some extent as well. So we want to preserve the front of the building for commercial purposes, whether it be an office, restaurant, retail of some sort. That's allowed already. So we need to have this in the back. And that's a way to make it ADA compliant and also preserve that prime real estate on the ground floor. That's my spiel on that part. Do y'all have any questions?
I had a couple.
for sure.
Why is the limit 5 now? Why is there a limit, or why do we need to limit it? Why don't we just, or what keeps us from doing away with it? What's the rationale behind that? I'm not pushing for that, I'm just trying to understand why it's restricted to begin with.
We don't know. It's been written that way since 2003. If you're looking at a square footage of a single floor, a standard lot downtown in CBD2 is 25 feet wide and 115 feet deep. And if you take the entire square footage of that, that's 2,875 square feet. And if you try to build 4 stories, that's a really big apartment on each level. At most, you're probably going to build like probably 4, maybe 5 apartments. That's huge. That's as big as my house, or even bigger than my house. And I live in a single family detached. So, and then my house isn't huge either. So typically apartment complex or apartment units are smaller because they're higher density and they're in more urban locales where you have smaller lots. And they should be more dense so you can have walkable areas. But yeah, we don't really know why it's 5 right now. But pushing up to 10 is better. It's probably not the greatest, but it's better. And it also is probably within, hopefully, something that's amenable to an increase in density, but also something that doesn't scare people if we do bring it forward. Hopefully the residents aren't necessarily, hopefully they're relatively comfortable with it, and so is city council.
And then, just to follow up to the one multifamily dwelling unit allowed on the ground floor, the Fair Housing Act, is there some percentage of housing that has to be ADA compliant? Does that tie back to the number 10? Is one enough?
There is, and it's part of the International Building Code. So it would have to comply with that percentage, and I don't remember the numbers offhand, but it should, if you have a maximum of 10 units, because that's easily, of course, that's 10% of the building that's ADA compliant from a residential standpoint.
Is it better to make that a little bit just more straight to the point, though? Speak to that item C, just say make it in compliance with, permit what is required to maintain compliance with the Fair Housing Act? Or no?
I don't know that it needs to be in the code at all. I think it can be. I mean, we can put it in the code because of the Fair Housing Act, but I don't think we need to justify why something is in our code or why it's not in our code.
Can they put a unit on the ground now anyway if they wanted to?
No, not in the.
So that's why C is there, to give them the ability to make that exception so that
Right.
they can make
The idea in a downtown like that is you're not going to want dwelling units on the ground floor, because then your downtown just becomes an apartment complex district.
Right.
You want the activity on the ground floor for folks coming in with, point of sales. The alternative to this, as far as allowing multifamily on the ground floor for mobility accessibility, is to make every building have an elevator, an ADA accessible elevator. It's a heck of a lot cheaper to just put the unit on the ground floor and then have stairwells, walk-ups that go to the 2nd and 3rd floor and 4th if you're creative with your heights. Although I think we limit it to 45 feet and 3 stories. But anyway, so yeah, the alternative is to require elevators, even though the building code only requires elevators once you get to
4.
I want to say the 4th floor and above. 3 stories are allowed to be walk-ups. So the only thing about this that I would take out the clause that reads to comply with fair housing. If we're going to allow it on the ground floor, just do so, but just make sure it doesn't face the public right-of-way, that it takes access from, other utility spaces.
So we will be willing to permit 1 unit so that they can comply with the act. That then kind of becomes a restriction on the number of units that can be put in there, because there's probably a percentage tie-in, like, is it 10%? I don't know what it is.
I don't either, but I would think that it would probably open the door to being able to put multifamily into a mixed-use building. And then once you have the ability to put the multifamily in, you've created a separate revenue chain, which may incentivize the development of these buildings. Right now, if they know, well, I can't put in multifamily because I can't put in an elevator, so I won't be able to get the compliance with fair housing. So basically what they're looking at is commercial or nothing. And maybe they're not commercial builders. So
I guess
when we free up, when we remove restrictions and allow more flexibility in the marketplace, you might get more persons that participate.
The 10, I guess, serves as a cap because you could have an elevator and you could theoretically put more than 10 there.
The 10 in the definitions?
Up above, yeah.
I think what we worked out with that was just math. We just looked at the size of buildings, looking at them as being probably the lots downtown are, 60 feet wide and 90 feet deep, and you did the math and you found out that, well, if you're doing 3 stories, you can get at least 3 units per floor, and then you're going to get 1 unit on the ground floor, so that's 10.
Okay.
Is there a reason, so in the townhouse, it says 4 or more dwelling units. Why on the multifamily, why don't we just say 2 or more dwelling units that are located above the first floor?
Because this is actually a maximum cap, and those others are minimums.
Right, but do we have to have a maximum?
We have a maximum now. We're just trying to elevate the maximum.
Right.
And that's what your question that started this chain was, why 5? And truly, we can't tell you. I can speculate. Parking, probably going to be an issue because we don't have parking downtown, nor do we require it. Wastewater availability, water service. I know for the folks that live downtown at upper floors and some of the structures downtown have complained in the past at peak hours, at least, of low water pressure in upstairs showers and bathtubs.
But wouldn't those be natural limitations when they came in to get the permit? You'd be asking them about parking, you'd be analyzing wastewater. Do we have to put an arbitrary number on it?
Not the developer's problem. The developer's going to go in there and build as much as they possibly can, and anything that doesn't happen beyond that is somebody else's problem to fix. No water, call the city. No parking, call the city. So.
Because we don't have anything that says they need to provide parking.
Correct. Well, our code specifically reads that the parking is determined case by case by the city council.
So city council could require them to provide parking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm for density because I come from downtown development. So I know that that's incredibly important. So yeah, I support the density. I support increasing it. I also like elevators though, so I'll just throw that in. But one thing I'd like to see too, on number C, where it says multifamily dwelling unit is allowed on the ground floor to comply with the Fair Housing Act, it should probably say that complies with the Fair Housing Act. So the unit has to comply with the Fair Housing Act. That's the only recommendation I would make.
But doesn't it have to comply to the Fair Housing Act, no matter what, whether it's explicitly said it? And with housing or retail, where does like TDLR and all those like accessible parking spots, do those come in with like a new development? Like, how you have to have a certain number of parking? So that's something. Okay.
I don't know the state's requirement for providing parking for dwelling units. I don't know if there's we do it in Kyle in our multifamily districts. I don't know necessarily if there's a higher power that commands that there is accessible off-street parking for dwelling units.
Okay. But when it comes to retail,
Because I think Austin has didn't they recently just do away with parking for the multifamily in their downtown? So you can now build residential multifamily units downtown without a requirement to provide parking for them. The expectation was just park on the street or take a bus or one of those scooters or whatever.
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm asking, so yeah.
Okay, first, I do agree with with the thought of to strike the to comply with the Fair Housing Act. I think one multifamily dwelling unit is allowed on the ground floor. The dwelling unit will be located in the rear of the building is sufficient, and there's no reason to add anything else to it. My question is more, okay, so if this is CBD2 specifically, yeah, I'm trying to think of possible a 4-story building in CBD2. I may be remembering incorrectly, but last time we looked at CBD1 and CBD2, one thing I noticed was impervious cover requirement was very different from CBD1 and CBD2. CBD2 required quite a bit of impervious cover, and so I think that. I'm sorry.
ISR and CBD2, not 100.
I thought that was CBD1. I could be misremembering, but from what I remember, I don't think a building like that can be built to that height and those kind of lot sizes with the impervious cover the way it is. But again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot. We have to double check it.
CBD1 is 65, the lot coverage, and CBD2 is 100.
Oh,
Because
okay, I'm sorry.
CBD2 also has 0 setbacks, so you can build to your natural boundaries of your
Okay,
lot.
it's 100. Thank you.
Can I follow up, though?
Yep.
If we take that out, though, they could put a unit on the bottom floor, and even if it's not required by the Fair Housing Act. But that's probably not an issue because no one's going to want to do that in this kind of development anyway. The only reason they'd put it there is to comply with the Fair Housing Act.
No, they'll put it there. They'll put another dwelling unit. I mean, if they can lease it, they'll put a dwelling unit there. It's the city that doesn't want dwelling units on the ground floor.
So do we need to be very specific about it being for the purpose of compliance with that?
No, I wouldn't be. I just allow it. We know why it's there. We just don't need to justify ourselves in the code. It's just another reason that someone can challenge your code.
Well, I'm just saying, if they didn't have to put one there to be compliant, if we strike that out, they could put one there.
Well, the way the code,
It's probably very likely.
yeah, the way it reads,
It's likely
they'll
that they
one
would put it
either
there
way.
and it would be compliant because they don't want to put in an elevator, which costs hundreds of thousands of dollars.
At least dozens of thousands of dollars
Yeah.
for the fourth story.
I guess I'm just worried, are we going to allow there to be an instance where they wouldn't have to have done that? We could have had all ground retail, but because we didn't make it specific, we've got some person that is going to go ahead and build one there when they absolutely didn't have to, and we lose out on a little bit of retail space. Okay, it's not a big deal. I'm just.
So the way I'm currently reading this, and it seems like we're all in a kind of agreement to strike 53-443C. It looks like under this it would go to 11 units though, just to tell you that, because it says C, the units allowed on the ground floor, but on the definition that we're changing from 5 to 10, it only specifies the things that count as above the ground floor. Because dwelling units which are located above.
Technically, the CBD2 stuff is a mixed use district. It's not a multifamily residential district. Well, but let's see, restricted.
But while this is a district, this is the CBD2 is a district. This is a zoning definition, correct?
Right. Mm-hmm. But the use. God bless. The only residential use allowable in CBD2 is multifamily residential restricted. So when you're talking about multifamily in CBD2, you're talking about that definition. So 10 or fewer dwelling units. So, right, and I think that's where we came, because we had decided that there would be as many as 3 units, maybe 4 units per floor if it's 3 stories, or potentially more depending on the way that the math worked out. But I still think that 10 worked out.
No, I don't mean like the definition of it. I don't mean like the dividing it for the thing. I mean like it says in the thing 10 dwelling units which are located above the first floor of a structure, but with the ADA requirement, it wants it on the first floor of the structure. Does that specific unit count towards the 10? Or are we essentially allowing 11 units?
It could be as high as 11, I guess, technically.
I'm just curious. I don't know.
So is that bad?
I don't think so. I was just curious whether it's intended or not.
Ten or 11, either one doesn't bother me. I wrote it as 10 total, if memory serves. But in that case, I didn't catch the edit to make it to where it'd be 10 total. So if it's better at 11, that's fine too.
Looks like it's 5% that's required. If this website
That's
isn't
the
lying
minimum.
to me. So,
And I'm actually reading that there is no requirement, other than that the ground floor unit must be 100% accessible. And that's it. So if there's a ground floor unit that's 100% accessible, then it's in compliance.
And I think the go around for that is you can have a 100% accessible unit on an upper floor, but you're going to need an elevator to get there.
Yeah.
yeah.
And
okay.
once you tell a developer, oh, you're going to need to build an elevator, they're going to walk. So it's better if they put it on the ground floor.
This actually says if building with 4 or more units that does not have an elevator is covered, all 100% of the ground floor units must be accessible.
So what happens if you take away the ground floor units?
Then you're no longer in compliance.
Right.
Yep.
So then the 10 and the 1 should be fine.
That's 10%.
It's
That's more than 5.
9%, but it's less, it's more
If
than
you have,
5.
if you have 10 on top and the 1 on the bottom, it should be fine.
Yeah.
Should be fine.
I
It's
don't
just
have-
an acknowledgement that, we're allowing 11 with the 10 and the 1, that's all.
Well, 100% equals 1, so
Right,
100% is
there you go.
the 10%.
Yeah, I'm just talking out loud here, trying to hopefully be helpful, so. Looks good to me.
Looks good. Are you going to take out that reference to the Fair Housing Act?
Before you see it again, probably.
Okay, good.
Okay. Moving right along, we have section 54.5, note 1. Currently it reads 2 3-inch trees that are in the front property line to the front 2 corners of the structure. And this is for single family and duplex houses, triplex and fourplexes. Sometimes, depending on the zoning district or how the developer also builds or makes the lots big enough or not, there's really not enough room for 2 trees in the front yard. And staff has some leeway to administratively approve some variations, but we wanted to actually put it written in code to where we actually have some specific guidelines. If there's not enough room, let's do this, or you're allowed to do this. So they still need a total of 2 3-inch caliper trees per residential lot, generally, instead of 2 in the front yard. You can plant 1 in the backyard, 1 in the front yard. You can keep 1 in the backyard. Maybe the remaining tree can also either be in the public row in the planting strip, or if it's private streets, it would be an access easement. But this gives a little bit more flexibility, so there's not an undue crowding of tree canopies at maturity. Plum Creek is a prime example. It had a lot of mature trees, especially in the original sections. But there is a lot of crowding on the small front yards with lots of trees in them and street trees. So this is a way to be more judicious in the cost of planting trees, and also making sure that the trees have adequate area to grow, which is always a good thing. So that's this change. What do y'all think?
You have lawn grass listed in there? Is that to avoid xeriscaping in the front yard or what?
You could xeriscape in your front yard.
That is part of our code as it currently is. We do require cover that's drought resistant. Primarily because whenever you build a new house, right before you get your C of O, you got to have areas covering the bare dirt.
You have to have a stable stand of some type of turf grass or other ways to stabilize the lawn before you get a CO. And the fastest way to do that typically is for sod, but they can put down seed and tack and mulch it. But you're going to have a stand of turf before you get a CO. That's in the building code.
Okay.
Now, the one, and I lost on this last time, Michelle was here. Michelle was the only one that was here when Mike was running the landscape. And the arborist came to town. This was one of the first things I ever worked on when I came here. And it used to be a 4-inch tree when I got here, right? The requirement for landscaping a property required that when trees were installed, they had to have a 4-inch
Yeah.
caliper. 4 inches from one side to the other. That's an old fat tree.
Yeah.
Without going into the details, the younger a tree is when it goes in the ground, the more chance it'll have of survivability. The more chance it'll have to hardy off. And here's a pro tip for you. Plant stuff in October and November. Don't plant it in March and April because it'll have the opportunity to get rooted, get acclimated to its location before the heat of the summer comes out the next year. If it's trying to do all those things to hardy off and get acclimated and put up with the Texas summer, it's no surprise that most of the stuff goes in the ground that dies. We still have 3 inches in here. I begged for 2. I begged for 2-inch trees. I said, don't do 4, let's do 2. I wanted 1.5. I was willing to compromise to 2. I got beat down to 3, and that was the best I could do. I am going to again raise my hand. I am coming to you again and asking for the permission that we can go from 3-inch trees, which also have another problem is that suppliers, nurseries don't have a lot of 3-inch trees in stock. Most people are buying smaller trees than that, and they realize that once a tree gets older than that, a lot of them, they'll just chip them. They don't need them, or they'll give them away to some other place like a park or something to that effect. Not a lot of people buy 3-inch trees like that. So I would ask that we have we already have the availability for them to bond landscape installation, and they can do it at the appropriate time of year. I did get that put in there, which is nice. So if you finish your house in April, you can actually move in if you've got sod there that's being watered daily, so the yard won't wash away. You don't have to put in all the trees and the shrubs. You can do it in a September or October. You just post a bond with the city, and then when you do the installation, we release the bond. But I'd like to see that where it reads a total of 2 3-inch trees are required. I'd rather it be a total of 2 2-inch trees be required.
So
Think about it.
that's standard. I mean, you'd have my support 100%. I mean,
Yes, it is.
I do this for a living. 2.5 inches is max is what we put in our front yards for our homes. Because of that reason, they root properly
And our replacements are required to be 3s too.
Yeah.
So when you put in 3s and they die, if you want to replace those, you're not going to be credited with anything less than 3 inches.
yeah.
That's not good
Well,
planning.
since you're the resident arborist, I'm going
I
to
am.
go with you and go with the 2-inch. I'm not going to argue with you. You're
Years
the
later, we
expert on
circle
it.
back around. It's the long con.
And you, really, really.
Can I ask what the opposition was to it last time around?
They wanted impact immediately. The expectation was if it's new, it needs to look good on day 1. And
That was a tough.
day 1 through 4 probably would look pretty good, but then those leaves would start to droop and flag because the roots weren't there for the uptake. And by day 41, they were probably looking pretty bad, and then they die. And it would look like that. So I think they wanted more impact sooner, and
They were
that's
worried about sticks being planted in the ground, essentially.
yeah. They really didn't want to see tiny little whips put in the ground. But that little soapbox, now that I'm down, and I'll walk away from that. It's actually not one of the more important parts of what's listed here as being underlined and in blue. This is a pretty significant derivation from the city's processes up till now, in that we will allow trees to be planted in the right-of-way. We wouldn't necessarily give credit for the development of private property with improvements in the adjacent right-of-way. We do have code language now that reads that plant material adjacent to your property in the right-of-way is your responsibility to maintain, right? That strip of grass between the curb and the sidewalk in front of your house right now, you can't just look at that and go, nah, that's right-of-way, I'm not gonna cut that. Yeah, you are. Yeah, or you're gonna get a visit from code compliance.
Really, people actually do that?
Oh, all the time, yeah. Or they go out there and they say, I'm tired of mowing this, so they take up all the sod and they put mulch down, or they put, some annuals or perennials down, or they do anything else that doesn't require them to cut that grass.
Wow.
Yeah, lots of folks. And similarly, tree maintenance is the requirement of the adjacent property owner.
Sure.
So, tree maintenance is a lot less often, so most people don't pay that attention to it. So what we're saying here is a reasonable accommodation for the development of these properties. And I don't think it should be looked at as an exaction. It's not a stipend, because at the end of the day, we could require them to put it back on the private property. But we recognize that that's not helping anybody. There's no reason, even the house that I moved into in hometown when I came, had 2 trees in the front yard, both Bradford pears, because I'm sure that's what was on sale that week. So they put them in the ground. They're pretty vigorous. They're pretty healthy growers. And in this climate, they had a long growing cycle. They grew into each other, within the first 4 years. And 2 of those trees was not tenable, and sure enough, one of them's gone now. So this is some common sense legislation, I'll call it, that still gets us citywide, to still get the same gross effect of an urban tree canopy.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I like that one of the trees can be in the public right away and the other one can be in the backyard. I have 3 oak trees in my front yard, and yeah, and it's kind of a nightmare with the canopies, and also major issues with the sewage. And
You must live on a plantation or something to have a front yard that big that'll fit 3 huge oak trees
I
in it.
don't. I live on a tiny little Plum Creek first phase. I think there were 4 oak trees in the backyard when I moved in, and
You had 7 trees?
yeah, and a crepe myrtle, and then 2 fruit trees that are now dead too. So it's the whole backyard is like this, and then the front yard is just the roots are the major thing.
Well, you don't cut a lot of grass, though. You got no sunlight to grow
It's
grass.
all dead.
It's a trade-off.
Yeah, exactly.
She gets
then-
that HOA violation for not having green grass, though. As well.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's it.
yes.
You can't win. You can't win.
But bringing it into the right of way is nice, because that's actually the one really good tree that we have. The other ones are beautiful, but cause a lot of issues with the ground sidewalks and the sewer.
Yeah, and it won't be a blanket permission. I know a lot of people get tied up in code. We still administer this, so the zoning code is can we, but there's not a lot of how can we. This will give you permission to put them in the right of way or other easements. We're still going to look at them and make sure that utility corridors aren't there's no conflict. I don't want you to put a willow right over the water line. I've seen some outstanding, very healthy willow trees when I was back in Georgia, some astronomical water bills, and they were just scratching their head. They couldn't figure it out. They had no idea where all that water was going. So yeah, we look at conflicts and interference like that, but just this is good policy.
Do you take into consideration, like, as you said, the size of the lot? There's a section in Plum Creek that's called garden homes in Peninsula that only have a 5-foot, they build to the 5 foot. So they have 5 feet in back, and the builder has actually put oaks.
Right. So the truth is, it's an unpopular opinion, but the truth is that site selection is paramount when you're putting plant material into the ground. Okay, the first 10 years of not 10. About 10 years, 9 years of my career, I worked for a landscape company. There is always the right plant for the right place. However, the building community, that is not their motivation. Their motivation is to call up the nursery or the grower that week and say, hey, what's moving? What's on sale? You know, what kind of deals do you have for me? Because, you know, this is the third week in June. By June the 30th, I'm going to be putting in, 40 shade trees. What can I get next week in around 40 shade trees? What do you they don't care. So that guy on the peninsula was able to get oak trees dirt cheap. And guess what? Y'all got oak trees now.
Everybody's got one. Not me, but everybody's got one.
Yeah. And that, super common, really common with tract builders, really common with volume builders. You need to get to individual architects, individual landscape architects, individual custom home type stuff, where they look at your site comprehensively, including the gingerbread that goes on at the end, as far as what shrubs should go in. I mean, I had a client once that wanted nothing but warm colors in the front yard and cool colors in the backyard, because he wanted to, he wanted people to be energized when they looked at his house and see all the pink here and the red there and that. But when he went out his back door and sat in his backyard, he just wanted blues and greens and wanted to be real calm. Imagine the level of detail that was required of that owner. Great client for a
Well, I
landscape
know
company.
in my planting bed, which was like 6 by 10 maybe, at the front house that they have to put in, and they have to put in the shrubs. I got 3 rows planted 12 inches apart of Texas sage and Indian. They're all massive hedges that are going to be 12 feet. And I was like,
No. So
anyway.
this code can only do so much. I get people all the time saying, what trees can we plant? What trees should we plant? Constantly asking the city, give us the list of trees that you'll put in the ground. Begrudgingly, I gave them a list of basically Texas natives. I'm like, just grab one of these and figure it out. I hope they don't put something that's got an 80-foot spread and is 50 feet high, right along the sidewalk in a subdivision. I can't guarantee they won't. I hope they put something that's tall and upright, that leaves room for everybody, but I can't guarantee they will. We make the stadium, they play the game.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, when you say right of way here in Kyle and the state of Texas, where exactly might I find that? I don't know anybody who owns a house in Texas. I know what it would be like in Kansas, but I don't know here specifically, so I just want to clarify for more.
Where would you find it?
On your property,
There's property pins on the front of your
Oh, no.
lot.
I mean, is it usually from in Kansas, it's sidewalk to the street. Is it still the same thing here in Texas, or?
No, rule of thumb, gosh. Okay, so our minimum, our most narrow rights of way of anything that's been built since 2003 is 60 feet.
Okay.
That's what you're going to find in more of your common subdivisions, and they go up from there. It depends on a number of things of how wide the street is, how wide the tree lawn would be on the backside of the curb, how wide the sidewalk is. Generally, I think the rule of thumb we use is 15 feet from the back of the curb,
Okay.
if everything is centered. And if the street section in front is typical. Now, if for some reason you have a 5-lane section of road in front of your house because there's a turn lane, a dedicated left, well, things might get a little different. Or sometimes the street will shift inside of the right-of-way if it's going around some type of improvement, like a utility pole or something to that effect. But I think the rule of thumb we use is about 15 feet from the back of the curb.
I know in my house, and this is just specifically my house, I don't know how well it holds generally, but if you can find your water meter box or your the electrical box, those are typically right at the right-of-way edge, or right within a foot or so of it. Anything so between those boxes and the backup curb, I mean, it's still your lawn that you have to maintain, but it's technically in the public right of way.
Any other questions? Okay, we could move it along.
All right, so that is everything in that portion. I took a few notes on a couple things that y'all had some concerns on. Let me pull up the next part, I think. Yeah, the height exception stuff. Okay, this is broken into 2 parts. and it's intentional. Let me share this real quick. So we have, from a regulatory standpoint, when we're administering our code, we have the City of Kyle generally in our zoning code, and then we have the Plum Creek Planned Unit Development Code. And Plum Creek has its own zoning code within the City of Kyle's jurisdiction. So we effectively administer 2 zoning codes within the City of Kyle. We are bringing forth an amendment that has been talked about with administration and staff to allow some flexibility when sometimes projects have to exceed are asking to exceed certain height limitations per zoning code. That way there's some flexibility in it that city council can determine if it's appropriate or not without having to go through changing our zoning code or taking it to a board of adjustment where it'll actually probably get shot down because it's not a hardship. Because sometimes it's appropriate to be a little bit flexible with your code. So the first part is with Plum Creek. We want to give the opportunity for city council to permit, approve exceptions to the height maximums for certain types of uses through the conditional use permit process. Staff would review it. It would go to y'all for a recommendation vote, and then move on to the city council for their final approval. This isn't a conditional use permit in the sense of the aesthetic standpoint, like we normally do, but this is a conditional use permit for a height exception. And so sometimes, for example, let's say they're going into a warehouse and they need to build the building a little bit higher to meet certain standards they need to be able to move product through it and what have you. But it just goes over the top edge of the maximum height, so they need to adjust for it. Well, it won't be necessarily a hardship, and it'll get shot down from the Board of Adjustment because it's something they want to do. But it's certainly not anything to get all flustered about if someone wants to increase the height. If it's just a few feet, in that specific case, then it's fine. So we're bringing this forward to amend the code to allow those exceptions when it's found appropriate and bring it forward to be able for the public to vote on it. Any questions?
I don't think it's actually going to follow the conditional use process. I think it's actually going to be a special exception. You'll note that letter F reads exceptions to height regulations.
Yeah.
And then I think F1 may very well be, actually it'll be G. I don't think it'll be F1. I think it'll be G. And it'll be the city council may approve exceptions to height maximums via the special exception process. And we'll put some criteria down for when it's appropriate and when it's not.
The way it's written to me, it looks like the city council does it. It doesn't come to planning and zoning. Is
No,
that true?
it reads currently it reads a conditional use permit, but it'll read a special exception is required and must receive a recommendation vote from P&Z. Now, if it's a special
Okay.
exception, it would go right to council.
If it's a special exception, it goes right to council.
If it's a conditional use, it would go to P&Z. Now, we have conditional uses that you all approve,
Right,
and then we have conditional uses that you all make recommendations and the council approves.
right.
Just a question of how it's spelled out. I think this one would be a special exception, and it'll likely go right to council.
So then it'd just go right to council. It wouldn't come to us.
But this change will be made in the zoning ordinance. So the text amendment goes to you. And then after that, the process would be that the standard operating procedure would be
Right.
for applications to go right to council.
Okay.
Couple questions.
I read this last week too, and I just now, the light just went off in my empty belfry up here sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I just saw human consumption up there. Just wondering, is that the right word? And if we're changing things,
See that?
Required to be
Yes,
placed
I
above
did
the
read
roof
that.
level.
I did read that, Paul. I
That
read
should
that,
be,
Paul.
shouldn't that be,
uh,
wait,
like-
we didn't even change that. We didn't write that.
I know,
That's
I'm
what's in
saying
there
while
now.
we're cleaning something up,
I think it should be occupation.
yeah, that's kind of what I was,
Not intended for human consumption. I did read that and wondered, what the hell?
Yeah, I saw that too.
it's like someone found
I didn't see that either.
the dictionary.
Maybe I didn't read this last week. I thought that was me. I thought I read this. Anyway,
So we want to change
usually
consumption to
am.
occupation.
Whatever the right word is, but that,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it should
Would it be
think
for
something.
general
Doesn't-
human occupation?
I think you can remove the word human. I'd appreciate that, because I don't think we're
Really?
keeping livestock up there, so we pretty much know who we're talking about. So we can take the human word out, and then it would be not intended for occupation, would be
Yeah, we're getting a little punchy now.
occupied spaces, conditioned spaces, that's another thing you can talk about. We'll work that out later. Good catch.
Okay.
there. Of course, we're talking about something else, and Commissioner Seidemeyer's over there reading something,
I couldn't-
sentences
Shubmeyer.
earlier.
That's Shubmeyer. You got it right.
It was causing pain, so. And there's a recommendation vote.
Okay, so,
Doesn't have to be affirmative, but that's what you're talking about. It may not even matter, it's a moot point.
Agreed.
Okay.
Okay, it's cool to me.
okay. Let me pull up the next one then. Okay, this one is essentially the same thing, but outside of Plum Creek. And it followed the same idea. And this one actually falls into the conditional use permit process that's already there in section 1047, authorized conditional uses. So Howard, are we still looking at a special exception, or does this actually need to go through the conditional use permit process?
This will remain in conditional uses. We're not changing that. This is still 1047.
And this pertains to
So-
not just height, but everything?
Well, there's a number of
the
different
main
criteria
crux-
in this list, but what we're talking about tonight is primarily what is now number 12 at the bottom of your screen.
I see it.
Right. So it's the same reason. You know, sometimes it's appropriate to allow an exception or a conditional approval of height restrictions are allowed to go up a little bit. I did put in there the exception being single family and two family. That being said, because already our single family and two family zoning code allows you to get up to 35 feet, which is 3.5 stories. And that's very rare inside the city of Kyle. So I didn't think, at least currently, it's not a problem. I don't anticipate it being a problem, but I also can't read the future. So I also edited or struck churches in all districts where not otherwise specifically permitted, because there is a federal statute called RLUPA, which is what, Land Use Institution Protection Act, right? Which means they can go anywhere they want. They just need to follow the zoning code for the district.
Can you tell
So
that
this-
the city planner is studying for his AICP exam? Sorry, Will, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So that it's redundant. Well, it's completely against what the federal law says. So I just struck it because we tell people anyway. Yeah, if a church wants to go in a single family district, they can. If they want to go in a warehouse district, they can. They're allowed to. So, so yeah. But this is essentially the same thing what you just saw with Plum Creek Bud. It's just a slightly different process because this is the most analogous way to achieve a goal of a relaxation of height standards. Any questions?
Anybody?
Just take care of red buildings? Or is that, no.
We already took care of that.
We did that last.
I knew he'd say something.
I did, yeah.
Okay, it looks like there's no questions.
Okay.
Anything else?
With the exceptions, with some of the amendments that y'all made, are y'all okay with us bringing these forward through appropriate process to make amendments to our code?
Cool with me. I'm getting a lot of head shaking here, yes.
All right, yes, sir.
Yep.
Yep, it looks like it's a go, Will.
All right. Well, cool. We'll make those amendments and I would bring it back forward to them just to do once more look over of them and then start the public process.
No, the next time they see this, it'll be for a vote, so we can advertise it. Tonight was the direction for us to bring it back to them.
Okay.
So you all will bring it back to us on the meeting in July, is what we should estimate.
Will the ad have time to run? Because these are zoning text amendment changes, so it's they'll all be
Yeah,
public
they're
hearings.
public
So we
hearing.
have to have an ad in the paper, but I think if we get the ad by this Friday, we should have enough time that the next voting meeting will have these items on it for your vote consideration. Then that goes to mayor and council for them to determine.
Cool.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
Second?
I have a motion on the floor in a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're out.